One else's.
No one else wants to be.
Yeah. Good morning. Today is the 6th of Av. We missed yesterday, the 5th of Av, because of me. I overslept. And it's the 24th of July. Okay, we're on page Tet, on the bottom. And we said, no, we didn't do this yet. We did? We said there were 3 reasons. Yeah, okay, we finished. Yeah, we're on page tet on the bottom. והנה, אם באמצע השפעת הרב שדורש לפני מקבל כזה שנקרא תלמיד מובהק, שהוא מקבל חיות מדברי הרב ומתענג משתעשע כנ"ל. So what is the definition of a Talmid Muvhak? Of a student who is dedicated, completely dedicated to his teacher. It's someone who receives all his life force from his teacher. You see that that's what he lives with during the day, and receives pleasure. And shashuim is a feeling of
Toys, games.
Yeah, shashua means a sense of exhilaration. He has a sense of exhilaration from his teacher. And in response to that, the teacher brings out everything. When we say everything, meaning that he has an emotional attachment to what he's saying. He's not just providing information. ובאמצע השפעתו נפלה לו למשפיע סברה יותר עמוקה וחדשה באין ארוך יותר נעלה מסברה קדומה וסדורה לו במחשבתו. And while he's teaching him, because we said that this is the end of the act, meaning the mind has come all the way down to the point where it's now being expressed by a teacher and being received by a dedicated student. So this causes new things to appear, new mind to appear in the teacher's head. And this comes in the middle of his teaching. So they're in the middle of learning a sugya. They're in the middle of learning something like this. For instance, we'd be sitting here, and out of nowhere, suddenly the teacher has a new idea, an entirely new idea to give over to a student. And he hasn't prepared it. It's related to the same topic. But now he says, but this is something better to explain it. For instance, a small example. We've been teaching this whole topic of teacher and student. Imagine now the King Solomon would be in the middle of saying the Song of Songs to his dedicated student, the one student that he has. I don't know who that would be. But he had one particular student who was his best student of all. I don't know, imagine that he did. And he's giving him over the whole idea of the God and the Jewish people being like a husband and wife. And he's telling him this whole story about how there's this complex relationship. And he has an animal soul and a divine soul. And he has everything in there in Song of Songs. And he's in the middle of explaining it, and suddenly he says, wait a minute. Why am I using this as the parable for the God and his people? Why am I using the parable of a husband and wife? I have a better parable. I just thought of it. My relationship with you, my dear student, that is the way that the relationship between God and the Jewish people is. How do I know that? Because a husband doesn't usually teach his wife in the normal sense. That's not what they're there for. They're there to enjoy their companionship. They're there to be together, to do things together. But it's not necessarily like so obviously that's not the part where he's going to explain it. The part where he's going to explain the effluence coming from God to the Jewish people is going to be the marital relationship between the husband and wife. That's where it really happens. Still, he comes and he says, but it's much easier and much more advanced and much more whole for me to now explain it on the teacher and the student model. But now he just thought of this. It just came down now. So what happens to him in such a situation? He realizes there's a lot more to explain here because I'm now going to switch to this model, but I didn't prepare it. I didn't think it through. והנה, שיאמר תכף ומיד הסברה החדשה שנפלה במחשבתו, זה אי אפשר. To just say what he now is going to be speaking about, that's not going to work. because it's only going to confuse a student. Moreover, כי עדיין לא נרגשה אצלו ההמצאה החדשה כי אם במוח החוכמה בדרך כלל, ולא פרטה עדיין במחשבה גם לעצמו, because all he has is the glimmer that comes from what we call wisdom. Wisdom is כברק המבריק על השכל, like a strike of lightning in the middle of the night. So you have this momentary clarity of vision about what you want to say, but it's momentary. It's like a strike of lightning. It comes and goes. You have to capture it. You have to use one of those kites and bring it down, bring the lightning down, capture it, put it into something, put it into a box, a battery, whatever you want. And then you have to harness it and you have to develop it. So it's still a general thought. It's not something that he can give over. כידוע שבסקירה כללית יש עדיין חשש הטעיית עצמו. There's a big problem here, because if I only have a glimmer of the idea, I may fool myself. I may trick myself into thinking that I understand it fully already, which I don't. I have this problem terribly. Like the moment a new idea comes, like, I'm flying with it. But I haven't thought it through. And if I think it through, I'll see that I don't understand it yet fully. So what happens? Even when you learn from someone, it's the same process. You hear this new idea, you're very taken by it, and very, very excited, exhilarated. Everything's there. You have to sit down and process your thoughts. And the way that most people do this properly is that they write them down. If you're a teacher and you're not writing down lesson plans, thinking, first I explain this, then this, and this, and looking at it, does it actually make sense? Am I not fooling myself that this does not follow from this, and this is not connected to this? But it's very easy to fool ourselves in our own minds, because if it's only the glimmer from the wisdom, and it's not yet an understanding, it's only chokhmah, there's no bina yet, then nothing is going to be in its place. So I may be fooling myself. שיש כמה הברקות, ואחר כך כשנפרטו ונתבררו, נדחים לגמרי. Sometimes you have this great insight, but when you think it through, you say, no, it's wrong. כי עניין טיפה שאינה הוגנת, שאינה ראויה להזריע, שנפלטה לגמרי. If you go back to the Song of Songs model from Shlomo Melech, from King Solomon, so there we have that there are many drops of semen that are pushed out. They're not taken to become a child. Why? Because a drop of semen, it says that the semen...
Putrid drop.
No, it says that the seed has to shoot like an arrow. The shoot like an arrow part is the wisdom. That's like a baraka mavrika l'sechel. That's like the lightning strike. It has to shoot out. If it doesn't shoot out, nothing's going to come from it. But a lot of times it shoots out, there's nothing there. Meaning in Shammai, they look at it, and they say, none of these are worthy of becoming a child. And so they're all nitchim. How do you say nitchim?
Pushed aside.
Yeah, but it's a better word.
Discarded.
Discarded, thank you. They're all rejected. They're rejects. Why they're rejects? Each one for its own reason. It didn't work. It's not the right time. It's not the right place. It's not the right generation. It's not this. It's not that. It's not the right thoughts. Whatever it is. This is not for making a child. So it's very interesting that in the middle of his mashal, of his parable of a teacher and a student, he goes back to King Solomon's. He does that a lot also in Shari Yichud. He does the same thing. Because in the end, both parables are very useful because we understand both of them quite well. In fact, most people don't understand the teacher-student so well. Even though it's much, much bigger because most people have been at least on the student side. But most people have not had someone that they had to teach hour after hour, every day, for years. And he becomes like their Talmid Muvak. Talmid Muvak is not two people that sit down like us for 15 minutes a day and study together. It's not. Talmid Muvak is someone like the Rebbe and you know, I don't know if he had someone who was exactly like that, but the closest to it would be like his relationship with with Leibel
Groner.
Yeah, with Leibel Groner. And then you see that Leibel Groner became a genius over time. He became something complete. I mean, he wasn't an idiot when he started. He was very smart. But over time, it's like, wow. Because that's what Moshe Rabbeinu says. After 40 years, you become me. That type of relationship that Moshe had with Yehoshua, that he's never outside the tent, that's a Talmid Muvak. For 40 years, that's what they did together. In any case. Certainly he can't say this to his student. It's half-baked. He himself doesn't know all the repercussions yet. We sort of skipped over this, but he brought here this verse from Job that reads, אז ראה ויספרה, הכינה וגם חקרה, ואומר לאדם, הן יראת אדני היא חוכמה, וסור מרע בינה. And from this they learn two levels of general contemplation and two levels of detailed contemplation. In any case, it's not important. In Shari Yichud he goes into this in a lot more detail. Here it's not so important. והנה, אם הרב ידחה ההמצאה הזו החדשה שנזכרה אצלו לזמן אחר שיחשוב ואז בזה, וכעת לא ירצה לפסוק חיותו של המקבל ששומר מתענג ודבר דרוש כפי שהכין מקודם, הנה יכול להיות שאחר כך כשירצה לזכור על אותה הסברה וההמצאה שנזכרה אצלו במוחו לחשוב בזה, תתעלם ממנו לגמרי ותשכח ממנו. So he says he can't put it off. Yeah. So here it's even worse. He's in the middle of teaching his students. They're there to learn. And as this new insight comes into his mind, he says, if I just push it aside, this is not the time for new insight, that's a bad idea. It's a bad idea because there may be a treasure trove in this insight. And if you push it aside, you may not remember it later. That's how these things work. They knock on your door. If you don't open it, they'll go away forever. They won't come back. They'll come back, but after 6-7 years. This happens from time to time to everyone. Like you have this insight, and you didn't develop it right away, so it's gone. And you may get it back after a few years, and you say, this is vaguely familiar, but I don't know from where. So it's very dangerous, this situation. On the one hand, you can't share it with the student, you can't fully develop it right now, and you also can't reject it. You can't push it away. So what do you do with this insight? כי כל גילוי אור שנגלה מהמאור ולא מצא כלי להתיישב בה, טבעו להיכלל במקורו. Because a light that is already emerged from its source and did not find a place to dwell, a place where it could be accepted, seen, looked at, studied, will go back into its source. That's when we're talking about thought, about insight. וכשעולה בדרך אור חוזר, נתעלה במקורו בעצמיות יותר, so you'd say, okay, but it came out of the source. Why won't it come out again? It says because it's hit something. It hit you. It's knocked on your door, and it was rejected. So it's going back to its source. And when it goes back to its source, we have a principle that says that any light, meaning any energy or any insight that has emerged from the source and gone down and been down, even though it wasn't accepted, it was rejected right away. But it's been down and it returns to a higher place than where it emerged from. And so it won't come back down again. It's already achieved what it wanted. Now this is a scary thought. There's insights that come every day, and if you don't do anything about them, they will never come again. Sometimes it will come after 6-7 years, but a lot of times you'll simply never see them again. Why won't you see them again? Because they did what they wanted to do. They were down in this world, and they went back up. And when they went back up, they attained the higher status that they wanted because they were down in this world. And that was it. By the way, it's the same thing about souls. If there's a child who dies in the crib, as far as the soul is concerned, the soul did everything it needed to. In fact, and I had some discussions with Rav Yitzchak a couple of times, and it's very difficult for the parents, and it's not something they want, but sometimes there's a child that the doctors say cannot live. Meaning he's not going to emerge dead, he's going to be alive, but he's going to die because he has whatever he has, and there's no way that he can survive. And it's a given. It's not like there's no miracles here or whatever. So the doctors, they don't want the parents to deal with the death of a child. And they're right, because the tragedy of a child that already emerged and then dies is much greater than somebody who doesn't make it out of the womb. And so the doctors will, and the rabbis, by the way, will paskin that you have to have a, how do you say, an abortion. You have to have an abortion. An abortion means that nobody does an abortion without first making sure that the fetus is not alive. That's how they do. You've been in the hospital, you know how it is. And they say that's one of the worst procedures that they have to do. Doctors hate this. But that's how they do it. That's the protocol. So the Rav is very much against this. He says, why? Let him breathe the air for a few minutes, even if he's going to die. It doesn't matter. You're not here for yourself, you're here for the child. So if this soul needed to come down into this world, emerge into this world, I don't know if there are any other considerations, but this is the only consideration I've ever heard. Meaning, by the doctors, they say it's easier to do an abortion than it is to do to deliver a child, a live child. It's completely different. It's true, it's completely different, but it's not really different. On the one hand it is, on the other hand it isn't. There are more complicated. It could be more complications if the child is alive, but there's much less maybe if he's not. But in the end, it's a delivery. When you're in the 8th month, 9th month, it doesn't make a difference. Usually they catch these things, in 3 months, 4 months. So there's not much to discuss. Once in a while, people don't notice, or they don't see, or the woman didn't do an ultrasound, or whatever it is. The reason that they do ultrasounds now is exactly to catch these things. And then you come out in the 8th month, and suddenly you have this full-grown fetus, is now in the last trimester, but they can't live because they have so many problems with it that they're not going to live. There's no question. So what do you do? So as far as the soul is concerned, the soul received what it wanted, which was to be in this world. It breathed the air for 2 minutes. It's finished. It doesn't need anything more. This is one of the hardest things spiritually to wrap your head around. I mean, you can accept it, but if you're faced with this situation to tell a couple, look, you have to give birth to the child, nobody's going to listen today. It's sort of over. The only place that'll happen is in Africa. I mean, nobody in the Western world does this anymore. But it's true. So the fact that it knocked on your door, this idea, the same thing. It's like a soul that came down, and you rejected it, it's fine. As far as the soul is concerned, it did what it needed to do. It was here in the world. The idea was here. That's why they don't say it goes back to its origin. They say that it goes back higher to its kadmuto, to before its origin. כי ההתחלה היא מבסוף שבעליון, והוא מחיצונותו של כוח המשכיל שהוא כוח ההשפעה, ואחר כך כשעולה בדרך האור חוזר, ניתלה בפנימות של כוח המשכיל שהוא מצד הדבקות שבו למקורו, שלכן אמרו רז"ל קשה עתיקה מחדתה. It's harder to repeat things than it is to learn something new. Why? Because when you're repeating things, where are you taking them to? To a higher place in your mind than if you're just learning something new. This is we don't have time to get into this, but this is a very important statement about why going over things a second, third time is so much more difficult, because what you're doing then is you're retrieving it from a higher place now. If you've learned it the first time, it's readily available. But if you're now doing it a second time to learn that same daf of Talmud that you just learned yesterday, to learn it again today, you're not learning it from the page of Talmud anymore. Where are you learning it from? From its origin and before its origin. And that's why it's so much harder to bring it down again. In any case. ועל דרך הקבלה מתחילה מקור השכל ומחוכמה סתימה, כשעולה בדרך הוא חוזר על ידי שכחה ניתלה לחוכמה שבגלגלתה. So in any case, it goes from what we call wisdom to the crown of the wisdom of the crown. But we'll leave this technicality, but we understand the idea. Okay, so tomorrow, God willing, we'll continue.